Every few weeks here on Weather World, we like to check in with some of our alumni to see what they're up to. And tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to someone who has made the leap from broadcast television to emergency management. Joining us now is Jessica Stumpf. She is a 2008 graduate of our department, and she is now the Director of Emergency Management in Greenville County, South Carolina. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
So tell us what you did right when you graduated in 2008 and how you made it to where you are now.
Well, after I graduated in 2008, I was a December graduate. So I went home for a few weeks and, kept sending out resume reels. And I finally, after several different interviews, landed a job at KWES or News West 9 in Midland, Texas. And I started off working weekends there. And then I moved to mornings. And eventually I was working 6-day weeks because we were short and whatnot. But we didn't come to an agreement on a contract. So after I left there, I was trying to find somewhere that I could do and learn something more. I got the severe thunderstorms and the dust storms and the ice storms in West Texas, but I hadn't really had experience with tropical meteorology. So I took a job at WMBF News in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I spent 3 years there working as the weekend evening meteorologist. I also did traffic and a little bit of web content and things of that nature. So that's where I went after I left Penn State. But while I was at Penn State, I was actually working on Sunday evenings at WTAJ in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So I kind of made my way around from Pennsylvania to Texas and then eventually to South Carolina.
So how then did you make the leap from television to emergency management?
So this is a really small world story. And anytime I talk to students that I meet at conferences or anything like that, I try to tell them how important networking is. It is so, so important. Turns out when I moved to Myrtle Beach, a family friend of mine in Ohio said, my cousin is the county emergency manager there in Horry County. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, as time kind of progressed, I was kind of wondering what his job was really like. And I would see people on his staff at different events that we would do, but I hadn't met him. So I eventually reached out to him via email and I said, hey, I know your cousin and I'm really interested in what you do. Would you be willing to sit down and have lunch with me and tell me about your job? And he said, absolutely. So we sat down and we had a whole discussion about the things that he does and whatnot. So I applied to several jobs and I eventually got one after a couple of different interviews. I started out as the individual assistance coordinator at the South Carolina Emergency Management Division, and that is one of the recovery programs that helps individuals and households. So that's kind of how I made the transition in.
All right, so you made the transition into emergency management, and you also did a little bit with earthquakes, is that correct?
That's right. After about a year in the individual assistance program, I really wanted to get into more of the natural hazards. So the earthquake program manager position opened up and I applied and I got it. So I spent about a year and a half as the earthquake program manager for the state of South Carolina, which involved updating the earthquake plan and the tsunami plan. And I also had other roles. We also had 2 disasters go on during this time as well. So we had the historic flood of 2015 out of Hurricane Joaquin and also Hurricane Matthew in 2016. One of the roles of the earthquake program manager at the time was also to be the backup hurricane program manager. So I had to know both programs pretty well and assist with that. I was able to take the director of the National Hurricane Center and his storm surge unit on a damage assessment tour up and down South Carolina's coast after Matthew. This was when the storm surge watches and warnings were just experimental at the time. And this helped kind of confirm that and make it an actual watch and warning for the next season.
Okay, Jessica, in addition to your degree in meteorology from Penn State, you also got your master's in emergency management from Millersville just a few years ago. How did that prepare you for what you're doing now?
I think it expanded my perspective. I think the hardest class that I took was social vulnerability of disasters. Hardest class I took and probably the most rewarding class I took. One of the interesting things about, starting grad school during COVID was, everything's online, which is great. The program itself is online, but I actually started grad school in the parking lot of a gas station in Georgia on my way to respond to Hurricane Laura back in 2020. I was a part of South Carolina Task Force 1, and I went kind of as their public information officer, but also a technical specialist using my meteorology degree and background.
So you are now the Director of Emergency Management for Greenville County, South Carolina. Tell us what you do for that position, how it differs from your other positions, and what you're doing now to prepare for the upcoming tropical season.
So it's definitely different, especially being at the director level and not a planner or anything like that. I did start here as a planning coordinator, writing our emergency operations plans and things of that nature. Now it's more of that coordination effort and building those relationships. And there's a lot of politics involved too. So you're dealing with county council and county administration and even state representatives and senators and things of that sort. So it's a little bit more of a political role and really building towards the things that we need and why funding is important, why we need these resources, and really explaining that to those that are higher up that can help us get that funding. So it's much more different than any of the other roles that I've been in emergency management, but I have a great team here and it's been very rewarding.
Okay, well, we're running out of time here. I just want to ask you, we'd like to finish off with what was your favorite memory when you were a student at Penn State?
Well, there's a lot of good memories from my time at Penn State, but I think one of them would be family dinner nights. And I did this at several different apartments that I lived at. We would either have dinner with our neighbors upstairs. My last semester, we would alternate weeks with the guys across the hall. So Miranda Muleman, also an alumni, we would exchange weeks. One week we would do dinner, and another week our neighbors across the hall would do dinner. And so we at least got a good home cooked meal once a week.
Oh, that's a great idea. Our current students should listen to that advice as well as the networking advice. Well, Jessica Stumpf, Emergency Manager Director for Greenville County, South Carolina, rather. Thank you so much for joining us here on Weather World tonight, and we'll be back in a moment with more.